Hello and welcome to the Inner Sense channel, where today we're meeting Nahids Belgeonne, author of Soothe, the book your nervous system has been longing for. Nahid is a pioneer of the practice of somatic healing, and today she guides us through how to tune into our bodies to prevent stress from overwhelming our lives. I really appreciate how Nahid emphasises the importance of frequent self-check-ins throughout the day, encouraging us to let go of our feelings and allow them to move through our body more easily. This approach ensures that emotions and stress do not accumulate and lead to a much more comfortable life. Enjoy this conversation, and please remember to subscribe to the Inner Sense channel for more information about how inner body awareness, known as interoception, can help us, and tips for improving how you feel. Thank you very much. Good morning, Nahid, and welcome to the Inner Sense channel. It's great to have you here.
Hello, hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. You're welcome. We've spoken a little bit offline, but I thought it'd be nice to hear your journey to becoming known as the nervous system whisperer, and a journey that's ultimately led you to write a book called Soothe, which one of my clients recommended to me and I thoroughly enjoyed. So how did you arrive here today?
Well, I think like most people who come into this sort of work, I was looking to resolve my own issues. I used to have chronic anxiety. I worked all hours because that was the only way I knew. It was it's really rewarded in this society, and was certainly rewarded in, the family I come from, which was a little bit dysfunctional. And I was kind of always looking for solutions. And generally what I found was things worked for a bit and then they didn't. So I got into running when I wanted to leave home, and it was really good while I was running. I felt good, but when I wasn't running, I still felt, quite all over the place and in an alarmed state. I started kickboxing when I left my first marriage, or was processing how to leave that. And again, it was good when I was actually doing it, but then you had to kind of face yourself again, didn't you? And all the things that are going on for you. And then I got into yoga, which I really loved. And then after a bit, it sort of wasn't enough. I kind of felt all these things were quite surface, because actually what you want to be doing is kind of looking underneath the bonnet of things. It's, you can, if you've got issues going on, underlying issues going on, and how you manage stress. And I'd suggest that for me, it was because I hadn't really been shown how to comfort myself, and my house was quite stressful. So that was my norm. I got really used to that. So I guess my foundational levels were quite hypervigilant. And then when you have life on top of that, it's kind of, how do you manage that? And when I opened my yoga, I got into yoga, I started teaching yoga, trained in it, started teaching it as well. And before then it had been fitness. But I got really interested in what's going on under the surface, because I suddenly found out that there was lots of other people like me. So all my clients used to come in and they do yoga, and you kind of felt like you had them for about 20 minutes in a class. So they were really stressed and they'd come in, and then they'd be sort of fidgeting, ready to go back to getting stressed again. So it almost felt like these things that they were doing was actually more doing. And it was another stick to beat themselves with, about things they must achieve. So I got very interested in the nervous system, which is the master system. And of course, that regulates all other systems. And I just studied and researched and trialed lots of different ideas out on myself and my clients, and kind of took the best of lots of different practices, got very deeply into somatic practice, trained on a 4-year Feldenkrais course, which sits under the somatic umbrella. And it was amazing and revelatory, and I really understood how, a lot better, how you can affect the nervous system, and what sends, how to soothe it, and what sends it into alarm state. And what I found was that actually, rather than we kind of approach it and that we fix ourselves when we're broken, we wait until we break and then we kind of do something to fix it, and then we just keep going, because actually the systems that we live in aren't really conducive to being human and having a family or downtime or hobbies or, and in a world in any way, because we are just completely programmed to believe that working all hours and earning lots of money and is the end all and be all. And of course it isn't. Generally you need enough to kind of have quite a nice life, but my ideal would be to be able to then develop yourself fully as a human being. And that actually involves less doing and more being. So it was kind of that way that really I found out about it all. And so my clients were having things like, they outwardly they looked really successful, but really they were existing to be good at work. And everything else was falling apart. They had fertility issues, sleep issues, chronic stress, anxiety, they're burning out, IBS, and on and on and on, all of those sort of diseases or illnesses or symptoms that are associated with constantly being in a stressed, alarmed state. And so rather than waiting until, you reach a peak of stress and then having to recover with a holiday or staying in bed for days, actually how you want to think about the nervous system is you have a little blip or an alarm and then you soothe yourself and bring yourself back down, and then you have another little one and you soothe yourself. So it's more like a ripple throughout the day, because actually we're organisms, we're not machines. And that probably you might have found this in your science-based teaching, and it's excellent work, of course. We stand on the shoulders of all of that knowledge, but it treats the human body as these isolated separate parts. And of course, we're not. Everything's interconnected. And I think once you understand that, it just makes it a lot easier and simpler, actually, to understand what it is that you need, because you're in relationship with yourself. And I think that's probably the issue with our modern world, is we're all out of sync with ourselves.
Wonderful. Yeah, you've covered a lot there. And one thing I want to kind of pick up on is you said about this ripple throughout the day, and what and as you've indicated, things are interrelated, and our bodies and our environment work in cycles. You covered the circadian rhythm and ultradian rhythm in your book. And you've designed your life, I understand, around sort of, and your work around 90-minute bursts of activity and breaks. What I often sort of speak to my clients about is this idea of little mini breaks during the day, so that their stress levels don't build up, and to the point where they can't get to sleep when it comes to bedtime.
Absolutely, yeah.
I really sort of heard that message strongly throughout your book, that you're encouraging people to check in with themselves, check in with their body, and to dial down the sort of stress response, so that they are kind of treating the ability to soothe themselves as a almost like just a kind of, as often as they go to their phone to send a text, you're almost doing something to soothe yourself as a regular basis throughout the day, so it becomes automatic.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's quite an alien concept, isn't it, for most people? Because we work, and then we end the day, or we might have lunch. Generally, people have lunch at their desk. Everything's very, very rushed. So it can be quite an alien concept. But what I get people to do is check in with how they feel before and after, so that it becomes second nature. So at the beginning of the process, you probably have to use a bit of willpower and make yourself do it. So even when you come to the end of your 90-minute burst of action, focused attention, whether you're doing well or not, it doesn't matter. You take that break, because in that break, you get to ponder and problem solve. And then when you come back for your next 90-minute bout of working, you have already problem solved, and it's really easy to kind of move into the next part of your project. And the way to do that is to rest. It's actually interesting because it's in the resting that the brain learns. You can't do and rest at the same time. It's, you can't do and learn at the same time. You're either doing one thing or the other. And in my work, it's in the not doing and not anticipating doing that actually the brain has a chance to, kind of wire all those neural pathways into this new pattern of behavior. And of course, that rhythm is mirroring your sleep patterns of, kind of deep rest, those 4 cycles of very, very deep rest and kind of 20-minute bursts of activity where the brain's cleaned and, all the housekeeping's done. And then you go back into deep rest. So it mirrors that throughout the day. And that's where your ultradian rhythms comes in. So you have kind of action, intense action, and then a little bit of downloading from that so that you can prepare yourself for the next thing. And I think we've lost the art of letting something go. Those rituals around letting one task go, pondering it and preparing for the next thing. But if you're working from home, and even if you're not, your mind has to switch so fast, doesn't it, from one type of thing to another type of thing. And then if you've got your phone by you, see, some awful news happening all around the world. And all of these things have the ability to affect your nervous system, because your nervous system doesn't know something's far away or on the telly or right next to you. And it doesn't know that something's causing you stress and something's making you feel anxious. It just knows, alarm or not alarm. It's that easy, it's that simple. Am I alarmed or am I not? And I think once you can reduce it down to your biology, it becomes less emotive and you can just do something about it. Like, oh, I've noticed I'm not breathing very much. Let me just breathe. And so on. And I just think it's really accessible and it takes any mystery out of it. And yeah, all of my clients find it kind of really achievable after that initial kind of having to make yourself do it.
I couldn't agree more. And your book contains a whole kind of toolbox of different approaches that people can choose from and test some of your activities and processes. And you've used lots of different words there, talking about kind of letting go and releasing. I know in your book you talk about what gives you a feeling of expansion. So wonderful. I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the case studies you mentioned in the book, particularly Maisie, who you described her as a person who learned how to soothe herself. She hadn't previously had that kind of ability or that skill. But there's one other thing I just wanted to pick up on first that you just said. Maybe it's gone. It's gone. So let's talk about the case study of Maisie's story and how that kind of summarized to me the sort of a character that we see so often these days because of the modern world we live in.
Yes. And actually increasing in numbers. All of my clients of late are a little bit like Maisie. She contacted me because she just realised that she had a bit of a problem. She wasn't really sleeping very much, and she felt very, very anxious all the time. And when I went into her flat, I actually had to steady myself because every single bit of media that she could possibly switch on was all on at the same time. So she had an enormous TV on a wall, and that was blaring out at her. She had a radio on in the other room. She was constantly on her phone or texting. I mean, everything. It was just so, rich in sensations that it was quite dizzying. And even getting her to sort of slowly switch each thing off one by one and getting her to be quiet initially was really quite difficult. And she'd never known it. She'd never known quietness or calmness. She didn't like quiet or calm because it made her feel very unsettled. She was yet so used to having quite a volatile sort of environment around her. And what she said to me about that was she always knew where she was when there was, a volatile environment. She kind of knew where she had to be. And she could really read those signs very easily. But when things were quiet, it made her feel really anxious because she couldn't, she had no comprehension of where something might come at her. Danger was what she meant. And so I just had to show her very small things of giving her an understanding of what comfort felt like, because her attention span was really short. So it's kind of working with her in really gentle, small ways to get her to feel in her own body what it felt like to be quiet or still or release. And actually, a lot of my work isn't about being still. It's about moving. So moving, if you're feeling a bit, if you're feeling in any sort of alarm state, moving that feeling out of you. I'm not a believer in letting it sit within you. Because when you're in an alarm state, you have a cortisol spike. And the best thing, or the most appropriate thing to do with cortisol is to move it out of your system, because it's preparing you to get out of danger. So I showed her lots of rocking and rolling movements, lots of primal movements that you would have done as a baby to soothe yourself, because obviously it's pre-language. And just as a baby, you would have moved towards your caregiver's voice if she was warm, or he or she was, had a warm voice, and that you felt compelled towards it. You would have used your whole body and moved towards it. And you would have also used your whole body to move away from danger, a loud bang or something like that. So it was kind of getting her to feel embodied, to actually feel the sensations coming up in her body when she felt anxious. And then there was much deeper work, of much longer work and more complicated kind of lessons that were specific for her, where we kind of looked to unlock her patterns of anxiety. And it's not true, actually, that you keep your emotions stored in your body. That's sort of an old paradigm, but it's been updated. You store it in your brain, but your body becomes a scorecard. So your body has patterns associated with that anxiety or, stress or fear or whatever it is. So we kind of slowly looked at that and kind of unpicked that and just kind of questioned and explored. Do you need to be like that now? Do you feel like you're in danger? So it's a whole process of inquiry, exactly as you would have done as a child, learning how to be in the world. Because what's really interesting about this work is, I think we've been undersold movement. Movement is necessary for life. It's your vehicle for interacting with your environment. And how you move is all about how you move through life. So if you are feeling anxious or stressed, often people will have a pattern associated with it. Their shoulders might go up, they might clench their jaw, or clench their fists or something like that. And so it's kind of uncovering all of those things that you subconsciously do and just kind of querying, do you need to do it or not? And by the end of the 12-week process with me, she had really great tools that she could look after herself, because what's important isn't that I'm teaching you forever and you're reliant on someone else. It's kind of understanding how you function and what sort of environment you need to function in. And I think the last I heard of her, she'd gone on holiday by herself, but she'd never did. She always had to have lots and lots of people around by her. So it's a really wonderful process of finding out about who you are and what makes you tick, and kind of thinking about who you want to be as well. So it's incredibly revelatory and compassionate. But she had a really great transformation through it.
Brilliant. And yeah, I agree with you about how the way in which we talk about where stress is stored and how it's stored has changed a lot in recent years. And as you were describing, the process, the role of the brain and the body being a scorecard, I think that there's those great communicators, Lisa Feldman Barrett and Bessel van der Kolk. They don't know, or they often don't agree with each other 100%, some of these experts, but I think by looking at all these different perspectives, it really helps people to piece together something that makes sense for them, for their own personal experience and their life situation.
Absolutely. And
I
I think,
sorry,
I think what's useful about that is, no one person has the answer. There isn't one theory that has the answer, but as you say, by kind of coming at it from lots of different angles and taking the bits that suit you. I mean, I'm very guided by science. I like things to be as unmysterious as possible, and I like to understand why I'm doing something. So I kind of think if you can give people the context, the rationale and the science behind it, they're more likely to do it. Whereas if you keep it all a bit mysterious and it's a bit of a fingers crossed thing, then it becomes superstition, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? So I'm very guided by science, and Lisa Feldman Barrett, I just think she's amazing.
And that came across really strongly in your book. the one thing, I'm sort of similar to you in that I like to have one foot in the scientific sort of literature, but
Mhm,
also very much be a practitioner,
mhm,
and check that what I'm sort of the beliefs I have match my experience day to day, and they track
mhm,
well with the world around me.
mhm.
So I mean, and that's sometimes what I worry about with clients. If I start to talk in too much kind of scientific or technical words, then they think I'm trying to rob them of their experience or rob them of the mystery. But
Yeah,
actually, the whole point of what you're wanting is for them to feel more joy and to feel more, if they want, a sense of awe. I think you mentioned awe in the book
I
as
did, yeah,
well.
yeah,
That's really
absolutely.
important, and there is still some mystery in our experience, and the beauty around us, that we should still be able to enjoy, as well as kind of demystifying some of these things like anxiety and stress, and trying to understand them in a way that's helpful.
Absolutely. I suppose what I meant was that I like the mystery and the awe to be on their side and their own discovery rather than me dictating what it ought to be, because I think that that's a bit of a worry. You often get, you have got traditionally in yoga, there's quite a lot of abuse. There has been lineages of abuse where people are indoctrinated or programmed in a certain way with somebody else's belief. But I think the beauty of somatic work is that it really allows you to discover for yourself. So you have a good foundation of understanding, and then you can build on top of that. But it's very much, the patient's or the client's journey. So yeah,
Mm.
no, I'm all for mystery and awe as long as it isn't somebody else's story imposed.
Yes, yeah, being used to maintain as you said, a kind of um, yeah, some institution or some belief
Yeah,
system that's not necessarily helpful. Um,
yeah,
maybe we can sort of use an example from your book of your own experience as well. So we're now using videos and cameras, and this is a kind of interview type setting. I remember from your book you talked about how making video content yourself for a long time, that was a very stressful thing for you, and you've sort of proved to yourself, and to us now, because you're in front of a camera, that these things that do cause us anxiety can be, we can change our bodily response and our idea of what is stressful, and become more comfortable, and to soothe ourselves in those things that were once terrifying. Can you say a little bit about how you
yeah.
became more comfortable making videos?
Yeah, sure. So I think it stems from not really knowing yourself and the sorts of things that make you comfortable, not understanding how to self-soothe, and therefore not understanding the sorts of environments that can make you function really well. So for instance, anytime that I'm fine at teaching people, and I've taught hundreds and hundreds of people, but anytime I had to talk about what I do or business or anything else like that, I kind of feel really startled about it, because I guess I wasn't moving around the stage, or, there's something about that. So I just discovered actually that when your inner world and your outer world are aligned, which I feel very much aligned now because I've been doing this work for a really long time, but then it's really easy to be who you are in the world. But when your inner world and your outer world isn't aligned, and that might mean, for instance, if you are working in a company whose values really don't align with you, so that everything you have to do and say is a lie, and it's a lie, and you really sense that on a cellular level, but you're having to use cognitive mind to kind of get through and convince people and yourself that this is what you're doing, and this is, it's a good thing that you're doing. So I think me becoming much more aligned with myself and being in better relationship with myself really helped me to understand who I am and who I want to be in the world. And of course, having lots of self-soothing techniques, but also understanding what I don't like doing. Like, if you want to have a very in-depth conversation with me about, I don't know, something very personal about relationships or something like that, the worst thing you could do to me is sit opposite me and grill me, because I'd just be like, oh no, this is just too heavy. But if we walk and talk and you're able to just, be out in the open air, and of course, all of those things are incredibly soothing for the nervous system, movement and greenery, then we could have a really meaningful conversation. So it's understanding what situations you feel comfortable in and what you don't. So I hated doing two camera things without an audience. This is quite different because there's an interaction, but without an audience, having to do two camera things sitting down, because I just felt like I'm stuck. But if I'm up, then it's really easy because I've got a little bit of room to maneuver. I'm standing, I can use my arms a lot. And all of those things feel more me. So it's kind of figuring out really who you are and just tending to that, being a lot more compassionate with yourself rather than thinking you're broken or defective or not good enough. Actually changing the environment and the situations you put yourself in. And now if anybody ever asks me to talk, I will just say, yeah, and I'd like this, this, and this, and this is how I would like to do it. And so it makes it a lot easier to be able to function in that way. So yeah, that's what I'd really urge to people, is kind of like, maybe the situations you're in are anxiety inducing. So, that's valid. Why don't you unpick what it is about that? So it could be lots of things, couldn't it? If you're doing a presentation, could be that you haven't prepared. It could be that, not that you're scared of presentations as such, but maybe you haven't prepared. Maybe you're talking about something you don't really know. Maybe you've been told to wear something you don't love wearing. All these little things can really discombobulate your system. A little bit like, children, they'll pretty quickly tell you if their trousers are uncomfortable, or if they don't like something, or they don't like food, they'll shove it out of the way. I think we have to kind of really retain that real sense of ourselves and what gives us comfort and discomfort, and then you organize a life around it, and then it becomes really easy. And you don't have to tell everyone. You don't have to tell everyone about what your discomfort is. You don't have to make a big thing out of it, but you just organize it in such a way.
I like that. And maybe we can hear more about some of the other techniques in a moment. Actually, let's dive into that now. One of the many tools and techniques and processes you mentioned, that you sort of said you use very often, maybe every day, I can't remember, is the 6-6 breathing. So it's sort of roughly 5 breaths per minute.
Yes.
And I most mornings I use a heart math device to do their resonant breathing, which they sort of recommend 5 breaths per minute, and it really works for me. Sometimes I like the feedback on the screen. It's a little morning ritual to me. So there is some there's some scientific explanation about why this particular pace is effective. We don't need to go into that in this video, but what I'm really keen to hear about is if you could give us an insight into the physical sensation that you feel when you're shifting into that kind of resonant breathing, 5 breaths per minute pattern.
Yeah, sure. I think possibly the strongest sense that I have straight away is that it really calms my brain. So from having quite a flighty brain, I also exist in this modern world with all of the different ways to communicate. I have an instant relief of just my brain calming down, so that makes me feel really relaxed. And then of course muscles, and I have the sense of my muscles kind of really releasing. I do it in bed for 20 minutes in the morning, and then I'll use it throughout the day. And I'll give you a really good example of using it throughout the day. So I moved to the sea. I'm a city girl. I'm from London, so I'm very used to driving around in London, but I'm used to driving in country lanes. And there's one road out onto the motorway. And of course, on a country lane, when you're going out and you're sticking to the speed limit, you've got all the locals right up your bumper wanting you to go faster, which I just daren't and don't want to do. And I often, especially when I first arrived, I'd play that beat, the 6x6 beat, and I would just completely I could feel my hands on the steering wheel just soften, and my shoulders would come down. And then I had a real steadiness in my breath and my heartbeat, and I would just calmly travel all the way out onto the motorway. So, you know, I use it throughout the day as well, but it just instantly is soothing. And actually, it's really interesting. As soon as it comes on, I have three little dogs. They all come around me to lie down. So it kind of works for everyone in my house. But yeah, it's instantaneous. It's really easy. It's so accessible. So kind of why wouldn't you? And the beauty of it is, if you know, 20 minutes may well feel too much to begin with, but you start slowly, 2 minutes, and then build up like that.
Super. Yeah, there's sometimes I send a link to people from, there's a YouTube, there's lots of 5 breaths per minute or 5 to 7 breaths per minute counters on
Yes.
YouTube that people can get for free. And as you were talking about living near the sea, there's one that I particularly like. It doesn't look great, but as it's sort of counting up and down, you hear the sound of water trickling one direction, then another direction. It always makes me think of being by a lake or something like that.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, I've actually just bought a little analog one because I really don't want to have my phone around me all the time. And it's great. And it's like a little glockenspiel, just goes do, do, do,
Oh,
do. And I
wow.
quite like it. So I just wanted to, and lots of my clients, I need to get them off their phones. So I went back to an analog one recently, which is lovely.
So is it wind up or how does it?
No, it's you recharge it.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yes.
Nice. I'll have to look into that. So could you summarize the Soothe program, sort of just, the different kind of aspects of it or components? You've already talked a little bit about breathing and rocking and moving. Yeah, how would you describe
Oh,
this?
okay. So how I would describe it is that the very first thing to do is kind of recognize the signals from your body. So in my book, I talk about window of tolerance. And what that is if you're very hypervigilant and you're just starting from that place, then it just means any little thing can just send you into panic, alarm, or whatever quite quickly. So the idea is, how can you extend that period before you hit panic, alarm? And so it's getting people to really listen into their signals from their body, like before you feel panicked or alarmed, what happens to you? It might be that you notice your breathing's quite short and it's up in your chest and you're not down in your belly anymore. You might notice that your shoulders come up or you start to clench your jaw. You know, all of us have different kind of parasitic efforts that you don't really need, that you're making all the time. So kind of noticing that, and then can you soothe that? So the breath is always your first port of call. I get on the floor and I rock a lot because it's just instantaneous. It sort of discombobulates your nervous system. You're on the floor, so you're safe. You are breathing at 6/6, so you're signaling to your brain that you're safe. So then when you're rocking, your brain kind of goes, what is this? And gets really involved. And it throws, it kind of throws messages to contract and lengthen your muscles very quickly. So in effect, actually, you're going in and out of your habit. And so it's just a great way to release kind of tense muscle. I do quite a lot of rolling as well. So they're great primal movements to help you to get embodied and feel yourself, sense your body. Because you can't have a tense body, you can't have a relaxed body and an anxious mind. They're the same thing. So kind of dealing with your physical sensations is a really great way to calm your mind. So I'd say that in essence is what we are doing. And then just noticing when working to some sort of rhythms, as soon as you wake up, go outside, get some light in your eyes. That's kind of quite well known now because it sort of resets a whole cascade of processes and tells your system it's now daylight. And then I also go outside at dusk. Move a lot more. So sitting per se isn't a thing that's really bad for you. It's a being in one position for a really long time. It's being in a fixed state, because we're kind of moving dynamic organisms. So kind of moving, fidgeting, I very rarely sit still. I'm always kind of moving around, pressing my feet in, pressing into a desk or something like that. It was really funny actually. I have my brother-in-law has Asperger's. And so I was teaching him quite a few things, and all the things that got socially conditioned out of him when he was young are all the things he actually needs, and we all need. That thing of behaving yourself and sitting in a chair and not fidgeting is completely the antithesis of what you want to do as a kid or as a human being. So, you know.
Yeah, that self-soothing, you know, it's people are born knowing how to self-soothe, and
Yeah.
I know in the sort of autism community it's often called stimming, isn't it, as well, where they say they stim, but and it's I think that they are viewing it as they're compassionate in a compassionate way, that it's that they understand why it's stimming, but as you've said, these things are often discouraged um, with young children because I don't know, it might be seen as disruptive to a classroom environment or something like that. Um, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that. It's, you know, obedience is a bit overrated, I think.
Mm.
You know, tending to yourself in a really compassionate way, I think actually should be our kind of guiding principle, because it'll stop you from getting, you know, meeting something even more serious later down the line, because all chronic states start from something very small, doesn't it? That suppression.
Mm.
And Gabor Mate talks quite a lot about the link between suppressing your emotions and inflammatory diseases. You know, there's quite a strong link between them. So
Yeah.
yeah, I sort of absolutely encourage everyone to be a weirdo and kind of rock and roll and shake and fidget in their real life, because the more of us there are around, the more normal it will appear.
And it sounds like we're on very similar wavelengths. Your point about sitting not necessarily being bad. Um, People often ask me, you know, I know they sort of come and say, "Oh, I've got bad posture. You know, what's the right posture?" And my response these days is, "There's no one perfect posture for a whole day long." So, as you said, you know, it's good to readjust and to move and to keep things in motion. As much as possible. You mentioned fascia in your book as well. We've had Robert Schlepp on this channel, one of the most popular videos of the whole channel. um, and yes, so this idea that you want to keep things moving and not stuck, Robert Schlepp sort of distinguishes between short-term acute stresses that, I don't know, a bang behind me that makes me jump,
Mhm.
versus some chronic background stress that cause your connective tissue to kind of
Pardon.
become more rigid over long
Mm,
periods of time. Um,
mm.
so it sounds like your program encourages us to keep things soft, keep things moving.
Yeah, absolutely. Hydrated and moving in multi-dimensions as well. So, you know, we're always told, aren't we, that you have to do squats, but it's kind of like that's just one-dimensional, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Or two-dimensional. But just thinking about moving at lots of different angles, that's also very that will keep your nervous system resilient. So it's just incorporating as many of those things as you possibly can into your day-to-day. So you're not becoming rigid about your exercise or movement, because that's not the approach either. It's kind of just enjoying being in your human form, isn't it? Like it's such an amazing, um, just amazing kind of structures going on that we're still learning about. Um, I just think really thoroughly enjoying it and kind of fulfilling its full potential is the way to go.
Mhm. Yeah. Then we had um, a therapist and journalist on this channel called Susan Sands, and she wrote a book about interoception, and her whole sort of thesis in the book is that, as she was targeting mostly to women as they age, and her
Mm,
idea is that because there are so many things, especially with the cultural pressures that um, might make it harder for people as they age, that we should or can seek out ways to make our inner experience feel more pleasurable. And
mm.
I think that's similar to what you just said, that there is a way to just feel pleasure, um, background level, low level pleasure in our bodies and enjoy.
Yeah. And you know, and I would, yeah, pleasure, I would just call it comfort. I think we're in such discomfort. We have no understanding of what being in comfort means. And again, that for me just takes any emotion out of it.
Mhm.
But what's interesting about movement, mind, body, is that you are more than your cognitive mind, of course. You know, your self-image is made up of your physiology, your sensations, your emotions, your thoughts, your actions, and your behaviors, which is pretty much all of you. And this work, and sounds like the work of everybody else that you've mentioned, and indeed you, embraces all of that. So we're not just having a cognitive mind approach, nor are we just having a body-based approach. It's actually a very integrated approach. And again, I think once people understand that, you'll actually view yourself in a very different way. I work with women, you know, beyond through menopause and beyond menopause, so postmenopausal, and they get really anxious about who they're going to be next. They get really anxious about aging, and the truth of it is that in this culture that we live in, older people aren't really given much value, you know. And as a woman, once you get older, you're not given much value. You know, if you've done your childbearing, you're not thought of as sexy anymore, or whatever, you know, to get yourself a mate. All of those things are meant to be behind you in our kind of mainstream culture. And so that really adds to your sense of yourself. But what's so amazing about this work is that you start exploring who you are and who you want to be. And the more you're able to do things physically, the bigger, you know, your confidence grows. You know, I'm sure you've worked with somebody where when they break a leg or they've done something to their ankle, they stop being brave and daring, and maybe they're not going to walk as far, or they don't want to go that way because it's got lots of steps and so on. So you can see how, can't you, how your mobility and your ability to do things starts to affect your idea of what you can and can't do. So yeah, so I think kind of this whole integrated approach just helps people to not get stuck in that new pattern of having broken a leg.
Mm-hmm.
Shift on from that.
Yeah, yeah. And the holistic approach, you do mention nutrition and food as well in your book. I'd like to, well, there's so many things I could talk to you all morning, but want to touch on the expectations, cultural, maybe societal or cultural expectations, or any expectations. It could be, you know, the expectation I've developed about, I don't know, how well I should mow my lawn or something like that. You mentioned Gabor Mate recently, or a few minutes ago. So I had the pleasure of going to one of his workshops in London this year, and have followed him for a while. He goes so far as to say is that our society is traumatized to a certain extent, and that we, you know, culturally we have developed maladaptive patterns of behaving. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. And you can see it now, you know, the propaganda we're fed about what's going on around the world and what we see with our own eyes. And then we have to carry on as normal. I went to a funeral the other day, and they were they're lovely people, but they were probably, you know, very, very English in that every time somebody cried, family, they'd say, "Oh no, there I go crying again." And in my family, you just cry. Do you know what I mean? It's just like crying at funerals. That's what you do. You wail and you gnash your teeth and, you know, you curse things because you're really sad about them going. So it's really interesting, isn't it? That you have to apologize for being human. Like sometimes I'll work with someone and they'll say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, my stomach gurgled." I'm like, "It's fine. It's a good thing. You know, it's a good thing it gurgled. It means that you're relaxed here." I think that does actually cause quite a lot of problems. And that's probably what I see in my online clinic a lot. That inner world and outer world just having a great big fight. And it kind of happens round about your 40s and midlife when you're having to juggle too much, and it sort of all just implodes, because actually working such long hours is a nonsense in the knowledge, you know, in this sort of era that we live in of information and knowledge. It's not manufacturing. You don't actually have to be at your desk for 8 hours a day. They've already had 4-day experiments around the country, and they worked really well around the globe, and they worked really well, but they won't put it in because I think, you know, our kind of culture is really just geared up for working and producing and getting people to be producers and not to be fully human. So I think we are all getting just lots and lots of problems, do you know what I mean, from having to adapt to that sort of toxicity. Yeah, so I would absolutely agree with him. And I think that's a really, again, it's understanding your environment. You know, if you understand what you're working in, you might be able to do something about it. But if you're constantly thinking that you're the defective one, it just makes you do, you know, more and more kind of, you know, self-improvement. And that's only going to get you so far. But actually, it might make you think about adjusting your lifestyle in some way so that you could work from home a little bit more, or going to your manager and kind of saying, well, here's a podcast about burnout and it happens like this. Do you know what I mean? Having conversations about it, having enough information so that you feel a bit more confident to be able to have conversations about it with the people that shape your environment. Yeah, it's kind of an awakening, isn't it? I always think this sort of work, it kind of really allows you to open up to what's actually going on, and where you want to take that is up to you.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. To be curious is a good thing. To kind of figure out why you are, because you can't go on the same, can you? If you had a burnout or a breakdown, or you know, some pattern keeps repeating, you've got to get curious about it, because it will stay the same otherwise. So yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with what he says, and I think he's incredibly compassionate and wise for saying it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need people to kind of stick their neck out and say things like that. It's reminded me of something else in your book, the importance of connection.
Yes.
And I actually wrote a book as well a few years ago, and I
What's it
quoted. It's called Restoring Balance. So I
Oh,
shouldn't self-plug on my own channel, but
why not? Do.
I'll send you a PDF of it, because
Great. Please do.
mused as I was going through your book about some of the similarities.
Great. Yeah.
So I think I quoted from, it's some quote from Howard's End that's always stuck with me, and it's something, it says only connect, and it's sort of retelling the story of someone who gave a sermon and said that the whole of her sermon was just boiled down to saying only connect.
Lovely.
And you mentioned that as well, that it's really important to feel a sense of connection. I think one of your exercises in the book was simply just to connect with the surface that you're on. So connection can come in many forms. It can be connecting to an animal, a plant, a hobby, the ground we're laying on, or our community. So what does a sense of connection feel like for you?
So I think it starts really being in better relationship with myself. I probably wasn't for quite a long time, because my head was a bit of a scary place, and I didn't really want to be there, and I wanted to be something else, and it was very outward. I didn't know how to actually make that change happen. So when I found the tools to do it, I felt a lot more at peace and a lot more grounded. And then I kind of suggest that then also draws the sort of people to you that you have a connection with. I'm kind of really not interested in having lots and lots of friends and it all being very surface. I have very good small circle of friends, and I can really devote my time and energy to them. And I think when I was younger, I kind of thought I could be really self-sufficient, and that's how you got on in the world, because that's what we're groomed to think. But the more you connect with people, you just have much more deeper, kind of meaningful relationships to begin with. But I think cultivating some sort of inner life is really important, you know, be that cooking or gardening or reading or making something, but just having something, being engaged in something that gives you peace and a value, because it isn't all about consuming, which you know, I teach quite a lot of younger people as well, you know, and their lives. One young woman said to me, what do you do when you're not on your phone? Because she's always on her phone. And I just thought it was really sweet. And I was like, wow, so many things. There's so many things to be done. But I'm not sure we would have had that question 30 years ago. It's funny, isn't it? What do you do if you're not on your phone? So I think it's really important to cultivate something. When I was younger, you didn't buy things to go out in. You made it, and you DIY'd it, and then you had a conversation about that when you went out. So it's just having something of value, I think, is really important to foster, as well as outside people. So having something that means something to you that you can get fully absorbed in, that's a connection. Could be religion, it could be, nature, something that really gives you a thrill and awe and wonderment and curiosity. So yeah, all of those things. But I think, as I got older and felt more peaceful about myself, I fostered a real kind of connection with my local community as well. And I probably wouldn't have done that before either. But it really does have to start with you.
Yeah, I do remember in your book you talked about the neighbours and the local community, and I think what's coming to mind as you're talking about that is this concept of sense making, and I think that it almost doesn't matter what thing we do to feel a sense of connection or to feel calm or to it's sort of, does it help us be at ease with the world around us? And if I'm focusing on cooking a meal and enjoying it, or making a gift for someone, or even being on my phone, I might be listening to an amazing podcast, or reading something that on my phone that is pleasurable or enjoyable for me, then it's sort of, I guess what I'm wondering is if a lot of our the challenges in our society is because so many things are distance from us. We can't connect with the outcome. If I'm a person working in a factory, working on a small component for something, I don't get to see the end user enjoying the mobile phone that it's making or whatever. Whereas back in the day, a craftsman might be working just as many hours, but they're a little bit more connected with the outcome of their work. Would
Yeah,
you?
yeah, that's really interesting because, of course, in the information age, we're not connected to the outcome of our work because our work goes on and on and on. So, anyone making something, they at least get to see, they get to be part of the process. But when you're not, and it's just emails and projects, and I don't know what do we do on the computer, but whatever it is that we're all busy doing, that's never ending, isn't it? So, that's another reason it's really important to do something for yourself, where you can kind of think, I finished this thing, whatever it is, a meal, or I've sewn a skirt, or I've made a gorgeous garden, or I've tended to my flowers, or whatever it is. There's a start, there's a middle, and there's an end, and you can kind of close that little tab in your brain. As you might have gathered, I'm very anti doing anything on my phone. It kind of just, I see too many people on there. And there's something about being on your phone and reading on your phone. Because my husband says that a lot. He said, no, I'm reading something nice. It's like, well, but still being on your phone, your lenses harden, the lens in your eye hardens at short distance. So you're still sending alarm signals into your nervous system. So I'd actually suggest get off your phone, Ian. Go and get yourself a book.
Yeah, and you did actually. I'm aware we've gone over the hour, so I'll keep you too much longer. But you talked about the epidemic of short-sightedness or myopia linked to screen time in your book, and it's been useful talking to you because I've remembered every so often to look above my camera and look out of the window in front of me and look at the trees to try and give my little break. So you've included tips on managing screen time and eye strain in your book as well. So could you very briefly just summarize how to help with that and take the stress off our eyes?
Yeah, sure. Well, the first thing is working bouts of focus time and downtime. That's really important. Just get away from your screen, get outside as much as you can. Rolling your eyes, letting your eyes close and just resting them. So you're resting your visual system, letting your eyes roll from left to right or round in circles, but really slowly so they can get lubricated, The muscles can kind of start working again, because otherwise they would have been in this fixed state. Going outside and practicing looking far away into the distance, and then mid-range, and then closer to you. So all of those things where you're just allowing those muscles to lengthen and contract, because when you're sitting looking at something close, they're just in contraction. But I roll my eyes a lot, and then I do a figure of 8. And then you're kind of thinking about the quality of one eyeball and the other eyeball. So you're getting really involved in the quality of your movement, not just the what you do. And then you might start to notice that your eyes feel less tired. So lots of little things like that, and throughout the day, of course.
I'm going to try the figure of 8 one. I've never tried that
That's a
before.
lovely one. It's a really lovely one. Yeah, I've got this little, the figure of 8 on the left side, right in the top corner, is really juddery with me. So it's something I'm constantly trying to smooth out. And it's really interesting because it will be stuttery, like staccato-ish, depending on how busy your brain is. Because of course your eyeballs are part of your brain, they just got pushed out. So it'll give you lots of clues as to how, jittery you are. Or not.
Brilliant. Or not, yeah.
Or not. I think I just wanted to kind of leave everyone with, actually it kind of all sounds like we're all doomed with technology and da da da, but actually if you introduce these short practices into your day, you reap the benefits quite quickly. It's quite a fast kind of feedback response. So yeah, do it. The trick to it is to actually do it. So yeah.
Implement.
Yes.
Fab. So what are the best ways for people to find out more about your work? I know you would do events as well. So where do people go?
So you go to my website, everything is on there. It's thehumanmethod.co.uk. I teach on retreat, so I'm in London every other month. And I take people, so that's a day retreat in London I do every other month. And it's just gorgeous practices to kind of move in multi-dimensions and lots of kind of brain to body work. And then I take people abroad as well. What else do I do? And I have the Soothe program that I offer. So I have an online clinic, and I have programs that I offer as well. So you can find everything on my website.
Cool. We'll put a link to your website in
And of
the...
course my book, you can still get my book. So yeah, buy Soothe, the book your nervous system has been longing for.
And if you want to avoid eye strain, you can listen to it on Audible, which is what I did.
Right. Yeah.
I was painting wardrobe doors in my garden at one point. Sunshine.
Great. All the good things. Lovely.
Thanks so much, Nahid. And yes, I'd love to speak again at some point, and maybe I'll even come to one of your retreats as well.
Amazing. I'd love to see you there. Thanks for having me on, Ian.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cool.
Okay, good. Was that all right?
Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. So one thing I haven't asked for yet is a preferred profile picture, so I can make a thumbnail for the video one to email over.
Okay, I will send you that. And then I'll send this to you by WeTransfer.
Oh yes, please.
All right.
Could you please, I can find your website, but could you send me the link just to make sure I get the right one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll send you that.
Great.
Anything else?
Don't think so. No, there was, I mean, I could have carried on talking, but I'm sort of appreciate
We waffled a bit at the beginning before we hit record, so I'm sure we were within the hour. And I'd really like to have the links to your interviews, because it sounds like you had some great people on.
Oh yes, yeah. I'll send a link to the channel, the Inner Sense channel.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a lot of people talking about predictive processing as well.
Brilliant.
Monty Lyman, I don't know if you come across Monty Lyman. He wrote The Painful Truth, and he's written The Immune Brain as well now. Recently, he's a British
I have
GP.
the Immune Brain, yes.
Yeah, so I've had him on, and yeah,
Right.
quite
Brilliant.
cool. I'll send
All
you a
right,
picture
thanks
of the
so
video.
much, and take care. Have a
Will
good day.
do. You
All right.
too. Take care. Bye.